is the Simon Conway Show. We've been talking a little bit about the Second Amendment today. Well, defiant U.S. sheriffs are creating gun sanctuaries, kind of like our liberal friends create immigration sanctuary cities. Well, now there's Second Amendment sanctuary cities as well, theoretically. We thought we'd talk to a gun expert. She's been on the show before. Her name is Emily Taylor, and she's from U.S. Law Shield, apart from anything else. Hi, Emily. How are you?
Well, I'm excellent. How are you?
I am doing just fantastic. Thank you for joining us on this. This is very interesting, isn't it?
It is, and it's something that we're seeing more and more, actually, to the point that there's a sheriff's association forming across the country for sheriffs who believe that they are bound to not enforce what they see as unconstitutional laws. So it seems to be something that's picking up steam.
Right, and the argument is very simplistic, right? Because all office holders take an oath. Me as a citizen, a new citizen, 11 years this year, but as a citizen, I took an oath that actually is stronger in some respects than the oath the President of the United States takes when you take the citizenship oath. But they take an oath, and part of that oath is to defend and protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And what they're being asked to do in some of these states is actually not doing that because it's going against the Second Amendment.
Absolutely. And in fact, there's another aspect to this which I think is very interesting, which is if you even put aside that aspect, the constitutional aspect of it, we give law enforcement officers all throughout this country, and in fact, we expect them to exercise discretion in how they enforce the law. And I'll give you an example of that. My husband is generally a very attentive individual, but a couple years ago, he was walking across the street. He was walking contrary to a light, and he got hit by a car. He's fine, but, broke his ankle, and it was a big to-do. And there was an officer there who could have written him a ticket for jaywalking. He was jaywalking, and the officer was there, and the officer could have enforced that law, but chose not to because, being in the hospital and with a broken ankle was punishment enough. So that's another aspect of this, is not only are we looking at a potential constitutional problem, which is really up to the Supreme Court. We've got some unfortunate rulings from a past Supreme Court here on the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of carrying in public. But we've also got this idea, which is that law enforcement has the discretion not to enforce laws when it's inappropriate. And when we have these law enforcement officers who agree that this would be an inappropriate use of their power, their time, and taxpayer resources, it's hard to argue with that logic as well.
Well, first of all, I'm glad your husband's okay. That's number one.
Thank you.
And if local law enforcement is listening, I jaywalk all the time because I'm a grown-up and feel I actually am responsible for my own actions, and I live in the land of the free. Just saying, you did say as a lawyer, let's put constitutionality to one side, which I found interesting.
Yes, and the reason for that is that we have this sort of gut check reaction, which is the Second Amendment and my right to bear arms is a constitutional right, and I get to do what I want, which I wish that were more true, because realistically, when we look at the Supreme Court decisions addressing how far the Second Amendment goes, it really doesn't go that far in the eyes of the court, at least up until now. We've got some cases that will be up on review shortly with the Supreme Court. We may have a different answer going forward, but up until now, really what's protected as far as the Second Amendment goes is your right to self-defense in the home. And so that's why, frankly, my view of how the Constitution should be interpreted vis-a-vis the Second Amendment is quite different than what actually lives and breathes as Supreme Court precedent today, which I know it's hard to hear a lawyer say, put the constitutionality aside, but that's why I have to right now, because my idea of what's constitutional is actually different from what the Supreme Court has said in recent years.
I know, it is fascinating because that whole self-defense thing has really got very little to do with why we have a right to keep and bear arms. It's fascinating to me. So let's talk about some of this stuff, shall we? Because we've got 4 states where this is going on right now. 2 on the left coast, which is very interesting, Washington and Oregon, where sheriffs are going, you know what? We've also got New Mexico, and we've got our neighbors here in the Midwest, the People's Republic of Illinois. So the Democrats hold the governorship, they hold both chambers of the state legislature in all those 4 states, and yet you've got sheriffs saying, we're going to create a sanctuary for people to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
Right, and it actually makes perfect sense in those states when you think about it, because states like where I sit in Texas, our firearms rights are very well protected, and there's no need for sheriffs to come forward in most parts of Texas and to craft this sort of policy. But when you look at states in which the left is in charge, and so you have really strong anti-gun policies, and yet you have pockets of the state that are very red. Perhaps they're more rural, where firearms are just more of a way of life as well, in addition to the politics being different. You have sheriffs who are elected by those people. Everyone shares the same line of thought as to how these things should be enforced and what the law should look like, and they feel like they need that extra layer of protection because their legislature and their governor isn't going to do it for them, and in fact is imposing the things that they find to be very harmful. So when you think about who is having to kind of step outside their boundary zone, their past boundary zones, and take this sort of action, it makes perfect sense that it's those left-leaning states that really have those pockets of, bright red who feel like their rights are being infringed upon, and they are.
We're talking to Emily Taylor. She is a gun law expert. She's a lawyer, and she's certainly not soft on crime in any way whatsoever, because you're a former prosecutor, aren't you?
That's correct, but that's actually part of what makes me so pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment is that when you look and see what criminals are doing and who they're targeting, they aren't stupid. They target people who are going to be easy to take advantage of, and if they know you can't carry a weapon, you are an easy target. And, it boggles my mind when I hear people addressing, well, we're going to reduce crime by taking guns away from people who are going to follow the anti-gun law we've imposed. It's just craziness, and all it does is create people who are easier to victimize, and the criminals know that.
Right. I mean, if I put a sign up in my front yard saying, hey, we're heavily armed in this house, but next door they don't have any guns at all, my next door neighbor would be furious with me.
Yes, they would.
Because
but you would probably be safe.
Yeah, because although my next door neighbours on one side are particularly liberal, but they're also not idiots, and they would know that the sign in my front yard would direct the potential burglars to the other side, to their house, because they're not stupid.
No, and that's criminals are wilier than we would like to believe, and that is part of why that just general view on criminality and on controlling crime is flawed. We're actually seeing it play out in real time in Brazil right now, because Brazil went through a process of disarming the populace in 2003, and since then we've seen their violent crime skyrocket, such that they have one of the highest murder rates in the entire world now. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Because the guns are in the hands of the bad people who know that the good ones are unarmed.
Exactly right. That's the key part. So let me ask you this, because I don't believe sanctuary cities when it comes to illegal immigration. I don't believe that's legal. So why would this be legal? Why would gun sanctuaries be legal? Gun sanctuary counties, why would that be legal?
Well, it's the same, frankly, both are legal until someone with authority tells us that they aren't, right? Now, in terms of right now, we have state and federal interaction when it comes to immigration. And so we're federal authorities to come in and say, give us access to your information on who is here unlawfully, who's sitting in your county jail. I agree with you. If the state says, no, you can't have that information, They cannot do that. Now, if the state says, like some cities, well, when we encounter someone in a traffic stop and they're just, getting a speeding ticket, we're going to decline to ask about whether or not they are here lawfully, or their immigration status. That sits a little bit more in the realm, I think, of what we're talking about here when it comes to firearms, because you're not interacting with the federal government in the same way. Now, that being said, let's say that in the state of Washington, the county sheriff declines to enforce a gun law the way the state wants them to. If the county sheriff then prevented the state police from enforcing that gun law, I think we'd have a huge problem. So that's sort of the counteraction that these states can go through in this situation is I think they can always send in the state police for enforcement of the law, and then there's very little these county sheriffs can do about it.
Fascinating stuff. We're going to keep an eye on this, and we'll let you know what happens. Emily Taylor, it's always fascinating talking to you. I appreciate your time. I really do. Is there anything, any way people can find out more about you?
Yeah, I would encourage people to go to uslawshield.com, take a look at their legal defense for self-defense program. There are gun law attorneys all over the country, just like me, state by state, who live, sleep, eat, breathe, this sort of stuff, and it's a good resource for law-abiding gun owners.
Excellent stuff. Emily, thank you very much. We will have you back.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.